سبحان الله يا الله الله أكبر
Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the world of Islam. From Denmark to China, from Australia to Argentina, from the USA to the UK, there are more than 1.5 billion Muslims in the world today. The religion of Islam is the fastest growing religion on earth, but unfortunately, the religion is often misunderstood and misrepresented. So I invite you to join me as I travel throughout the world of Islam to give you the opportunity to know the truth about Muslims and the truth about Islam. You are now entering the world of Islam. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back to the program, The World of Islam. Our travels have brought us to the United States of America, to the city of Seattle, Washington. And as we said, Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world, and also in the United States. Islam is also the fastest growing religion among the men and women in the United States of America. Today we're joined by one of our sisters in Islam, Sister Michaela Corning. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
And welcome to the program. Thank you for agreeing to spend some time with us and share your stories with us.
No
so sisters, tell us a bit about yourself and your upbringing and how you came to Islam.
Okay, well, I was born in Washington, born and raised. My family is a mixture of both Protestant and Catholic, religiously speaking.
Well, when you were growing up, did you come from a very religious family?
I would not my immediate family. I mean, it definitely was something that was around me continually, but it's not like, you know, I think my father growing up in parochial school, you know, going to Catholic school, he had a kind of a negative impression about that, so he sort of geared away from religion in general. But we definitely grew up with a strong sense of, you know, having that there's a God and there's a creator and all of that. And, you know, other values like integrity and honesty were very strong in my family, but they weren't necessarily, you know, grounded in a religious tradition, so to speak. Although, you know, we went to church and Mass, and I, you know, was baptized Catholic, and, you know, all of those pieces. So I would say that, you know, in terms of the most religious Americans to the least, I think we're somewhere in the middle, you know, where a lot of American families find themselves. So, some things in the tradition I didn't find out till much later studying religion, why we did certain things like Easter, for example. But, so yeah, I mean, we weren't entirely religious, but I was actually born in Eastern Washington, and when my parents were divorced in 1982, my sister and I and my mother, we moved out here. So since I was about 8 years old, I've lived in the Pacific Northwest.
And then, so in this area is where you went to university?
Yes, I graduated from the University of Washington. And I won't tell you what year. I'm just joking. Okay. And I grew up mostly on Vashon Island, which is an island that sits in between Point Defiance, Tacoma, and West Seattle. And you have to take a ferry to get there. And the island is very homogenous, you know, mostly white, middle class. And I think that my first introduction to Islam was our neighbors, because they were African American. They're one of the only African American families on the island. They're one of the only Muslim families. Their father was an ex-Sonics basketball player, Zayd. I think you're interviewing him later. And they had kids that were my age and my sister's age. So we used to play together and you know, build forts in the woods together and all that kind of stuff. And when we would go to their house, there were just certain things about their lifestyle, because they were practicing Muslims, that even as a small child, as someone 10, 11 years old, I noticed. And
what are some of those things, if you can remember some of them?
Well, one was that they didn't eat pork, which at the time I just thought was hot dogs, because hot dogs were from, you know, typically from pork in the 80s. And then, you know, going to her bedroom, I noticed that she didn't have pictures on the walls of, pop singers like Michael Jackson and Madonna and those people. And I asked her specifically why she did not have posters on her wall. Because me as a child, I did. I had all those, pop stars and everything. And she said, well, our father taught us that we're supposed to idolize the prophets and not famous people. So I thought, oh, that's an interesting concept. And I also remember distinctly asking her, how come she didn't have pictures of God on her wall? In my mind, that was Jesus.
Right.
So, and she, as a 10, 11-year-old, she told me, well, we don't think that God is a man, and, you can't make pictures of God because we don't know what he looks like, and Jesus and God, and I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting, concept. And then I remember distinctly her showing me her Quran and telling me that she could read that, and I just was so amazed. Wow. I mean, ever since this is just part of my personality. Ever since I was a small child, I've always been interested in people that were different than myself. When I lived in Moses Lake, many of my best friends were Hispanic, and me as someone, very, Aryan, Anglo-looking, I was always attracted to those people, just interested in them, their culture and everything. So the fact that Miriam, could read the Quran, and it just was something very, very fascinating to me, even as a small child. So those things stuck in my head. And later when we got into high school, we didn't socialize as much. It was a very small high school, so everyone was kind of just friends with everybody. But we weren't as close, and we didn't socialize as much together. But I remember her wearing the hijab, and we also played basketball in junior high, and so she wore long shirts underneath her uniform and long pants.
And how did the other students react to that? Or
some people would say things about her, and even though I wasn't really super close to her, I still felt this desire and need to defend her. And so I would say, oh, she wears the hijab, because she's, a woman now, and that's what women do, and that kind of stuff. I defended her, even though it's not like we weren't best friends at the time, but I still felt like, it was sort of like my duty, as maybe corny as that sounds. But so, really knowing their family, and she'd also talk to me about a lot of other cool things, like, oh, we had dinner with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar,
Yeah.
Wow, you did?
Yeah,
at the time I was like, I don't really know who that is, but I know he's famous. So I would say that was my first introduction to Islam, is just knowing that family. And there was actually another person who went to high school with us who was friends with one of her brothers, and he converted to Islam too.
One of your brothers?
No, one of Miriam's brothers
Yes.
had a friend the same age, who's about a couple years younger than I am. He ended up converting to Islam when he was about 17 from knowing the family, and now he lives in Kuwait actually, and works in their education system or something. So, that's the kind of family they were, very open and loving people. And after I became Muslim, I actually contacted their mom, Tayuba, and just because I knew they were Muslim, and I just wanted to reach out, and she saw me at the mosque.
Let me digress just a little bit.
Okay.
Let me ask you, what were the interim steps, that you came from having some idea and curiosity in Islam to finally coming to accept Islam for yourself?
So when I was 17, I ended up moving in with my father, and ended up going to community college. It was a program that had just started that year called Running Start. And I went to the community college full time. One of the classes that as a senior student in high school, I ended up taking a class called Middle Eastern History. And my huge, research paper that I did was on ancient Egyptian culture and just the Middle East in general. And you can't not learn about the Middle East and not learn about Islam. So during that class, I think, just the paper that I was doing in general was another introduction